Well, here I am with my good friend Russ Winter, all the way from Prague, and we're doing a little bit of a pre-record today because I am not going to be where I usually am on Friday, but we can't miss out on the last Friday of every month, and I'm going to figure out a way to bring Russ's intro in when I edit this, so we have a complete Winter is here experience. Good morning on this end, Russ. How you doing?
Yeah, good morning. I can see that the sun is coming up wherever you are.
That's
Texas
right.
or California? Or
Well, right now
California?
I'm channeling Southern California, and
California. And you can see that for change, I'm kind of here in the middle of the day for one of these shows, one
right.
o'clock here.
Right. Yeah. We got your midday energy going on. Look out. Right. No sundowner show for you today, buddy.
Yeah, when my eyelids, the eyelids start drooping in those
Right.
shows.
What are we talking about? Oh yeah, that another asshole who fucked up our lives. So is there anything contemporary you want to talk about before we jump into Louis Jolyon West?
Oh, I just referenced a show I did with Giuseppe a week or two ago on what I call a San Francisco bust, where we kind of broke down the total destruction of San Francisco. It's kind of like who would have thunk? Who would have thunk that this would have happened?
Yeah.
And I wanted to really document like just 31% vacancies in their offices.
Yeah.
They're just their retail, major retail down in the core of the city is just being wiped out almost on a weekly basis. It's just like a total steamroller of this bad culture that they have that has an impact. You can't get away with this type of stuff. You can't let the city slip. It's the broken window theory.
Oh,
So,
absolutely. Absolutely. And, I lived in the Bay Area and spent many, many days and many hours in San Francisco, lived there a couple times. And
volume's gone.
oh, the
Is
fall is,
that you or me?
might be you. I'm going to check that out.
Testing, testing.
I can hear you.
Oh, you're good. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
It's okay. But the fall of San Francisco was rapid and precipitous, right? It just happened it just dropped right off the edge. And so, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into play. I did a series of shows probably about 6 or 7 months ago where I really got into the political nuts and bolts of San Francisco and how the political machine spawned people like Dianne Feinstein, Nancy Pelosi, Willie Brown, Kamala Harris, Gavin Newsom. They all come out of San Francisco, and there is kind of a nest of these people in San Francisco. And what they did to the city was their program was to, on the one hand, support development. Like all these people came from Pacific Heights, they were all stinking rich. They all wanted their fingers in the development pie of San Francisco. So they were all very pro development. But on the other hand, and Willie Brown was the one who really started this, was that they created relationships with special interest groups in San Francisco. So you had the gay community, the Castro, which spawns Harvey Milk. You had the Latino community in the Mission. You had Chinatown. So what they did is they basically pandered to all the special interest groups so that they could get their votes and promise them all these goody things. But on the other hand, they're promoting massive development in the city. And so you have this two-fisted machine, which is really what the Democrats do, is they work both
Well, see, a lot,
channels.
a lot of the development they've done in the last 20 years has been tax abatements,
Yeah.
tax deals to tech,
Yeah.
and so they don't contribute to the tax rolls.
Right.
So that starts to put pressure on the cities because they've got a big welfare system.
Well, this is
But
back in the this is back in
I
the
think the thing,
70s.
yeah, I think the
Yeah.
thing that really took San Francisco down was what I'm referring to as the grifting industry. So I'll give you an example. They have these street people. And the number that I saw was they have like 9,000 active street people. I would swear it would have been more. So I'm not sure if that figure is even accurate because it's much more down in Los Angeles. And they have a $2 billion budget to deal with these people, if you want to use that word for it. And 75% is administrative expense. So you got
Yeah.
$1.5 billion a year going into hands of grifters who create a political machine very powerful political influence to run with all kinds of deleterious policies, including dealing with drugs, and then this Proposition 47, which decriminalizes they call it petty theft under $950, has created a monstrous organized crime. These aren't just poor people that are stealing to survive. It's much bigger than that. They have what are called diverters. So the street criminals go in and rob the stores, which is causing them to close, take off with probably thousands of dollars worth of merch because nobody's going to enforce anything. Because say you steal $3,000 worth of merch, they're not going to prosecute that either. They have these big warehouses and they have these big marketing organizations where they sell the merch. And there's 5 diverters called diverters that market this stuff nationwide, this fenced product. Where's the police and the FBI? Again, I have to ask, where's law enforcement?
There's none.
Because you have a organized crime that you could concentrate on. It's very monopolized.
Yeah. So
why don't they stop it?
When I lived in the Bay Area, I used to go to the Oakland farmers market down by Jack London Square. And invariably, there would always be somebody selling household products. Like, where do they get these household products from? And that's what they're doing. This is part of the resale side of that equation. And all those products wind up at flea markets, at farmers markets.
Well, they end up on Amazon. They end up on eBay. It doesn't seem to be any investigation of it. It's just like hands off. And so you lose your city. That's just the way it is. You're going to go along with those kind of policies and let these kind of grifters run your city, then you're just basically headed for the flames.
Michael Schellenberger wrote this in 2021, San Francisco, and it's Why Progressives Ruin Cities. And Michael Schellenberger was part of the 2-man team, him and Matt Taibbi, that were going through the Twitter files that Elon Musk released. And I saw him do an interview on this book, and Schellenberger comes out of the sort of the Democrat progressive world, and he wrote this incredible book about why San Francisco has failed. And one of the things that he mentioned in his book, Russ, is that the city actually did better when there was less money for social programs.
Yeah, and law enforcement, money put into law enforcement. So they've denutted the police.
Yeah,
they've racialized the police. They made everything about race. And so let's say you've got a criminal, you don't put a mugshot up because they claim, well, then that's racist because a lot of brown and black people there.
Right.
Or something happens on the subway or what do they call it?
It's called BART. It's called BART.
BART.
And Muni.
Something happens on BART.
Muni's the other one. They have 2, BART and Muni. Yeah.
They don't put up the surveillance camera footage.
Right.
How do you do police work with that going on?
You don't. I mean, they're basically slowly strangulating the police force, and the police force is kind of a mixed bag at times anyway, right? But now there so many cops have left police departments over the last 10 years. They're just done. They're like, I can't do my job. I'm going to retire. And this is what they want. And they can bring in new people who they can say, here's what you do. You really don't prosecute anything, right? If you take a report, only put down sort of the, basic details. Don't get into any particulars like, well, who they are, what they look like, this male, female, and they get their new people, right? This is what happens. They did the same thing with the Army, and they did that with the Army with the shot. And you had people leaving the Army because they didn't want to get the jab. And so we're dealing with this whole replacement society and this replacement culture, and the replacements are beholden to their new masters. And this is why nothing gets done now.
Yeah, it's a kakistocracy. Kakistocracy is ruled by the worst in societies.
Yeah.
I saw a real interesting interview with the last sheriff of San Francisco. I think his name is Valenzuela or something like that. Maybe that's not quite right. And he was talking about it because he was a law and order guy. And they just said they just piled every barrier in front of me imaginable. He decided to go in and clean up Venice Beach, the county area, apparently Venice Beach, where he had jurisdiction.
Right.
And he cleaned it all up, and they just railed on him and organized a campaign against him, voted him out of office. So the good police don't get supported.
So the other side of this is a place like Venice Beach. There's just an immense amount of drugs that not only get taken but dealt through Venice Beach, right? So it's a distribution point, and you don't people who are in the illicit drug trade. They don't want their distribution point shut down, right? Like
Yes.
yeah,
That's your grifting. That's your criminality, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
that aspect of it, because this is a big market. So to support the market, they steal and give them some benefits, freebies to live on, give them no incentive to really get off the street. I listened to a homeless advocate that lived on the street, and he said there's a myth that normal people that are poor, that have bad knocks, end up on the streets. He says they always have some other option, either family. They don't live on the street because it's just not their style. And so the
right.
people that are living on the street are just wrecked individuals.
Yeah. I remember one night I used to take my bike and ride it through downtown Austin at night, usually like on a Friday or Saturday night. And one night I pulled up on this very, very nice state of the art homeless shelter. And I saw all these people. I didn't know what it was. I saw all these people sitting on the sidewalk, and I walked up to this guy. I kind of rolled my bike up and started talking to him. I said, "So what is this place?" He said, "Well, it's a homeless shelter." I said, "Really? So what's going on with these people there here? Or do they stay there? What's their story?" He says, "Oh, most of these people, they have places to live, and they congregate on the street. And if they don't, they're not going to go to the homeless shelter because they can't do drugs up there. So they'd rather, if they have to stay on the street, they'd rather stay in the street. It's more important for them to do their drugs." And then he said something really interesting. He said, "You see that guy right down there?" I said, "Yeah." And this guy must have been an undercover cop or something. I don't know what he was, but that guy is one of the main dealers for all these people sitting on the sidewalk right there. So I was looking at us. I said, "Yeah." He said, he's a notorious dealer. They're all going to buy drugs from him tonight.
Yeah, in fact, you have to buy a location. You have to
Yeah.
pay him to sit there or to camp there.
Yeah. So they're
It's
right.
it's very well organized by these criminal networks.
Yeah. And so most of those beds in that facility were empty. They were empty because those people, even if they were on the street, they wouldn't go there. They'd rather spend time in the street doing the drugs.
Yeah, hang out all night, because nighttime is kind of when everything gets interesting for those people.
Yeah, yeah.
It's the 2 o'clock and the 3 o'clock of the night. Very dark personalities that hang out that hour of the night. I'm convinced of that now.
Nothing ever good happens.
Why would anybody go out at 3 o'clock in the morning? It's just nothing but trouble.
Right. Nothing ever good happens after midnight, really. Like that's what coaches would tell their players. You better get in by midnight, because past midnight, you're dealing with a whole different breed of animal. What's the homeless situation like in Prague? You guys have any homeless there?
Well, it's very interesting. It's very respectful. You'll see beggars. I don't know if they're probably homeless. I don't know. You'll see them in certain locations around the tourist areas, and they're in this sort of bowing position. They'll have a cup, and they're sort of on their knees and sort of slumped over like this. You picture it?
Yeah, yeah. So, are these people?
No approaching tourists, no approaching people. Simply sitting there quietly in a very submissive position, hoping that somebody gives you a donation. And they do. People give donations to them, give them coins, and that's how they subsist with begging.
Right.
And there probably are you can kind of see a little bit of drug influence going on. You can see people that are kind of stoned.
Right.
So it's not, I think meth is a problem here.
Yeah.
But nothing like the United States, because they don't really have policies that And I've seen the police move people along.
Yeah. Well, let's get into some of the drug stuff. And one of the godfathers of drug use and sort of a kind of an early czar in some ways of psychedelia and other drugs. And you did a really incredible job on kind of deconstructing the life of Dr. Louis Jolyon West. And this is another one of these architects of MK Ultra, and starting with a lot of his early work at UCLA and LSD. And so let's get into this, Russ. I'm going to bring up your article from your website.
Yeah, 1924 to 1999 is his period, his era.
Mm-hmm.
And a leading researcher of, I think he was really big into amnesia and disassociation, what's called coercive persuasion, hypnosis. He was a hypnotic expert,
Right.
hallucinogenic drugs. Pedigrees, parents were Russian Jewish immigrants. What's amazing, I'll tell you what's amazing about him is if you were to try to do some research on him, he is really scrubbed.
Yeah, that's what you say here.
Yeah, all the Google and YouTube things of interest that I kind of located a few years back are scrubbed. Is anything controversial about him? For some reason, as you'll see, he's so involved in so much skullduggery. Unbelievable, his associations and connections.
Yep. So let's read this letter here. June 6, 1962, letter of Aldous Huxley to Harvard's LSD mushroom and DMT guru Timothy Leary. Dear Tim, thank you for your letter. On January 23rd at San Francisco, I met Dr. Yanniger. That's Oscar Yanniger.
Yanniger is the guy that was we did the show on the LSD reunion.
Yeah.
Yanniger was at his house.
Whom I had not seen for several years. He tells me that he has given LSD to 100 painters. I also spoke briefly with Dr. Jolly West, professor of psychiatry at University of Oklahoma Medical School, who told me that he had done a lot of work on sensory deprivation using improved versions of John Lilly's isolation tank techniques. Interesting visionary results. But I didn't have time to discuss the details. Yours, Aldous. For what it's worth, sensory deprivation was a major area of research of the MK Ultra program. So yeah, what's his name? John Lilly was using these sensory deprivation float tanks and taking large doses of hallucinogenics to open up his consciousness, so to speak. And they did a movie about it called Altered States with William Hurt. So that connects him to all these different people. This is where we see a constellation of relationships.
I personally think that disassociation is huge. I think they've kind of suppressed that as a legitimate theory of how human behavior operates, or very extreme human behavior. But you just see it over and over again. See examples of it.
He kind of looks like Santa Claus here. Like put a little Santa cap on.
Strange looking guy. Yeah, right, look at him, big headed guy.
Yeah. So 74 to 89. He got, $5 million in grants. That's a lot of dough. And through the NIMH, and a major funding conduit for CIA programs. Have you seen other connections between the NIMH and other characters, other people? Have you made any?
Well, they kind of get involved with these prisons.
Interesting.
Because they have live subjects they can play around with.
Right. You know, this kind of gets into an interesting territory because you're going to talk about Patty Hearst here in this article, and the whole Symbionese Liberation Army thing is a total psyop.
Yes,
total psyop. Donald DeFreeze is recruited.
Yes,
and comes right out of the Phoenix Project. So again, that's Southern California. Right. So California, Southern and Northern California it's really ground zero for all this freaking mind control. during the 60s and the 70s.
Yeah, and they
even
pulled
the
these
80s.
guys out of the prison, the Vaca up north of the
Vacaville, yeah.
Vacaville.
Yep,
They,
Vacaville State.
they literally recruited them out of the prisons. They had a character in there, I think maybe working with West, who worked with some of these guys and kind of, I think, probably mind controlled them.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. They got psychological profiles in all of them. And like these are the guys we want. Let's bring them in here. Let's see if we can, pull some levers in their heads. So he gets to start kind of in UCLA during the 50s and the 60s, where he's doing running these programs of LSD and LSD therapy during that time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's right there. Millions poured into
And,
UCLA.
a lot of records of this stuff are kind of scrubbed. It's part of this cleanup that the CIA did in the 70s, where they just started disappearing the records of stuff that they'd been involved in.
Right. So, I mean, when you look at this figure, $14 million, $14 million back then was a lot of money. Probably closer to $50 million in current money. That's what I would say.
Yeah, probably 100 million. Yeah.
Maybe $100 million. So think about that amount of money with that time scale. This is no joke here. What's he say here, Russ? What's he talking about here?
Well, he says that in some patients, outbursts of uncontrolled rage. So they're looking for rage and anger and disassociate. Just people that are sort of disassociating to begin with.
Yeah.
Have definitely been linked to abnormal electronic activity in deeply buried areas of the brain. For many years, neurologists have measured the electric activity of the brain with electrodes attached to the scalp. Now, by implanting tiny electrodes deep in the brain, electrical activity can be followed in areas that cannot be measured from the surface of the scalp. He says the future looks even more promising. Well, this is 1970s. So imagine what the technology is now. And imagine the subjects that they have to work with.
Yeah. So that was
because they were picking and choosing their subjects.
Yeah, there is a lot of money being invested in what they call cybernetics. And that was sort of the engineering and mapping of the brain and getting the brain to do things that was outside of the theoretical will of the individual. It was huge. Lots of money went into that stuff, both on the East Coast and the West Coast. It was a big project.
Yeah, it's kind of goes in the realm of hearing voices, voice of God, having an alter ego, having an entity.
The alter ego thing.
That's what Ted Bundy referred to. He said he had an entity that he never really thoroughly explained.
Yeah,
and because people kind of go, "Oh, don't say anything about that, Ted."
Wow.
We don't want to hear too much about that. It just sounds like an excuse, Ted. Really? I mean, because you hear that over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Danny Rawlings, a serial killer in Florida, talked about his entity.
Right, hearing voices. I mean, it's a big thing with these guys.
Urging him to do shit. And we're gonna get into Timothy McVeigh. We have to deal with him before we get in the show, because I got a lot on him. And guess who was involved with Timothy McVeigh?
Are we talking about him right now?
Friend here. Yeah, Dr. West.
So in Hallucinations, Behavior, Experience, and Theory, Dr. West and a colleague discussed selective drug prohibition and applications as a means of social control. So before the show, I sent you a little message on Twitter, and I said we need to talk about this one sentence because it's huge. It's a huge sentence, and when you think about the idea of selective drug prohibition and applications of means of social control. I was talking with a friend last night who's in severe pain. She really screwed up her neck and is really struggling with having to deal with this pain, right? And they have completely mismanaged the whole the whole pain the pain relief medication side of care. And if you go back and you look at OxyContin, right? They had OxyContin, and that was what the industry was using. And everybody was getting hooked on Oxy. Right here, take some oxy, take some oxy. Well, what happened was, of course, they found out that OxyContin was highly addictive. And there was one family who was making a shit ton of money off of it, who have never had to deal with any repercussions really around this, maybe settled a little bit financially, but they made way more. So now you cut off people, right? You cut people off the oxy and they still have the pain. Now, all these doctors, well, I don't really want to prescribe pain medicine because, it could lead to addiction. I can lose my license, right? So now what do? They hit the streets to score fentanyl to deal with their pain. This is exactly what this sentence is all about. Let's create a nation addicted to oxy. Let's cut them off and we'll send them into a whole other area where the next level is 10 times worse than the thing we had them on.
Yeah, and set up a whole new drug distribution involving these grifters and same
That's right.
people they're taking down Sanford. I just think it's all the same people.
Yeah,
And
but
they
the
have
whole
protection.
idea,
They have classic protection. Law enforcement doesn't really go after them in any serious way.
Yep. Yep. And it's also another way to launder money too, right? So it's not just the money that's coming in from the illicit drug trade, but it's coming in from all these different other kind of nodes that are leading into it. And it's easy to launder money through those channels.
See, I kind of wonder if you can manage, if there are ways of managing pain without addictive drugs.
Sure,
So when I had my knee surgery, of course, I was in a lot of pain when I had my injury, my ruptured tendon, quad tendon, and surgery. And so I was asking them, I said, "This isn't OxyContin, isn't it?" Because they were giving me some pills.
Yeah.
And I don't exactly know what it was. I looked it up. It's some kind of a pain medication they use. And that next day, I was higher than a kite. I felt too good. You know what I mean? I just felt, for where I was trying to manage pain, that drug that they gave me made me feel too good.
Yeah.
So you understand what I'm saying?
Of course. Absolutely. It's like, wow, man, let me go back.
This is bad news.
Let me go back and get some more of that pain medicine.
Right, because I'm such a skeptic on stuff. I immediately realized, hey, man, I can't use this stuff. I like it too much.
Right.
After one day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, most people would just continue to take it forever.
Right. And then imagine getting cut off.
Yeah.
And that's what you got to deal with. It's like, oh shit, I mean, I don't want to feel this pain anymore. I got to figure out where I get it. And they have a conversation with somebody, say, yeah, I was like that. And then I found this guy and he hooked me up, and it's all this.
I mean, I just wonder about pain management. The whole concept is feeling too good. It just seems like common sense.
Well, I think, as always, I think that there are solutions that they completely turn away from, because it's much more profitable
Right.
to steer people into solutions that are going to keep them hooked or on the drip line for as long as they need to or want to. But there's a very interesting substance called kratom. I don't know if you've ever heard of kratom, but it comes from like the opioid family, and there are people who when they kick heroin, or when they kick the opioids, they will shift over to kratom so that it helps them deal with the immediate sort of heavy duty withdrawal symptoms. And there are some people who believe that kratom is also addictive, which it is. I mean, anything is addictive if you get into it. But it's an interesting alternative on the legal side for managing pain. You have to be careful with it. There are varying degrees of kratom, but this has not been embraced or really adapted, by the pain industry or the medical industry. So there are alternatives out there. Some people can get by with some CBD and kind of a heavy duty kind of concoction of CBD. Some people will go the actual THC route, and THC can reduce pain, right? So there are alternatives out there, and they're far less invasive than the opioids or the synthetic opioids. And I would even imagine that there are probably some technologies out there beyond drugs that could help people deal with their pain. So, but we're not interested in that now, it seems. We just want to get people addicted, cut them off, and then watch their lives implode.
So West is talking about that, like a manipulator early
Absolutely.
on.
Absolutely. He understands the power of drugs, and they're accelerators and brakes. And they can manipulate the acceleration and the braking all they want if they throttle the drug supply. And then, of course, I don't know where he is on this. Maybe you do. Then we get into the whole SSRI world with serotonin reuptake and stuff like lithium and all these other Luvox and all these other kind of
right.
Yeah. So
just, again, it's feel good type stuff to make you feel good and to start disassociating.
Yeah. Yeah. So that comes out of this whole period, right? And man, it's heavy duty. So yeah, this is another interesting paragraph here. And you talk about hypnosis and communist mind control. And it's really funny. I've been thinking about that movie, The Manchurian Candidate, lately, which is an amazing movie, by the way. Came out in 1962. And what's interesting about the movie, it comes out 1 year before the Kennedy assassination. And it's like, what's going on with that?
Yeah, that's a movie everybody should see.
Yeah, it's heavy duty.
That was really prescient. Now you notice that he's involved with Margaret Singer. Now Margaret Singer is like a whole new show. Supposedly working with monkeys.
Right.
She was doing a lot more than that. She was involved with some very sketchy stuff, and some of her philosophy was odd too.
What's up with these Margarets? You have Margaret Mead.
She's
Margaret
kind of a
Singer.
Darwinianism type stuff.
Right.
But let's go through and talk. Let's just look at the coincidinks, what I call coinky dinks of West's involvement with various, historical figures, assassins, and
Jack Ruby right there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. When Jack Ruby started claiming from his jail cell, now I have completely another article on Jack Ruby. He was controlled by another hypnotist. I believe they had Jack Ruby under this mind control program, but he started, claiming from his jail cell that a cabal was responsible for JFK's murder. And Dr. West showed up on April 1964 to examine the Oswald assassin and concluded that Ruby was paranoid and mentally ill. The text, and I have a link, the text of Dr. West's letter on Jack Ruby's sanity recommends confinement to a mental institution. So he shows up in Dallas, said, let's just get this guy tucked away.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting too.
He says, Dr. Smith requested that I come to Dallas today to see Mr. Ruby briefly and to testify at a hearing tomorrow regarding the possible value of further psychiatric studies. Yep. Hypnosis and intravenous sodium pentothal were included among possible techniques to provide further information concerning Mr. Ruby's state of mind at the time he shot Lee Harvey Oswald on November 24th, 1962. No shit, Sherlock.
Don't you think it's weird that the guy who plays the shooter in The Manchurian Candidate is Lawrence Harvey, and then you have the shooter Lee Harvey Oswald? I mean, I always thought that was really strange.
I never knew that. That's the first time I've ever heard that name connection.
No, it's really weird how these two names kind of sound similar. And I'm gonna shoot you a little movie here that you could climb down the rabbit hole with this, and it's called Domino, and it was directed by Tony Scott, and it's the story of Lee Harvey Oswald's daughter. Lawrence Harvey's daughter. See, I mix them up. Lawrence Harvey's daughter, Domino, becomes this kind of bounty hunter, and it's a wild movie, and a lot of it is based on things that actually happened. So like Lawrence Harvey's daughter almost becomes like a version of an MK Ultra. It's crazy. It's a crazy movie. It's a theatrical movie, but she had some connection to it in terms of, the content. I think she's dead now, but if you want to climb down a rabbit hole, check out Domino and Lawrence Harvey's daughter. It's weird. It's just weird, like life imitating art, imitating life.
Yeah, a lot of prescience.
A lot, right? So he has Jack. So Jack Ruby's also connected to the obviously the mob. He's got that strip club in Dallas, and so here we have this intersection of these two worlds, right?
Well, when he started snapping out of it because they had him and he wanted to talk,
right?
It's kind of hard to keep these people totally under control. They kind of slip out. They slip into reality once in a while.
Yeah.
So they had to bring Jolyon to kind of shut him down. Oh well, let's just
that's the text. That's the text right there, right? That's what you found.
That's what he said. Yeah, in his letter.
So I guess he went to Dallas, Dr. Smith.
Talking about using sodium pentothal on him. All of his regular techniques is sort of his techniques of hammering on people.
Right. Dr. Smith, generic.
So there's one example. So now let's go to the next one.
Right. So
Sirhan.
Oh wow. So the interesting thing about Sirhan is that I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he was Palestinian, right?
Right.
Wow. Isn't that interesting? We get a Palestinian killer of the president. Or not the president, but the president.
They found a perfect patsy because he was very susceptible to hypnosis, extremely susceptible to hypnosis. Just like one of these guys you could just hypnotize and kind of influence with just a snap of a finger under a skilled operator.
Right.
And the guy I'm mentioning was William Joseph Bryan, and he was he was Sirhan's handler. I call him setup maestro extraordinaire. He handled Sirhan Sirhan. But then it just so happens they bring Dr. West in on the operation too. So it's all tied together.
So was it Sirhan Sirhan one of these guys that heard voices as well?
Yeah, he's disassociated. Disassociation. So he examined Sirhan Sirhan and proclaimed him to be yet another lone nut. So Dr. West is the big purveyor of the lone nut theory that you hear so much over and over and over again. They're just run it constantly. Every little fake event that they do. They had the guy driving the U-Haul into the guy with the Nazi flag on the ground.
Oh my! Right.
Come on, another lone nut.
Did you see? And you saw the guy. You saw the guy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
They're not even trying anymore.
There's some kind of black magic there.
Not even trying anymore.
There's some black magic there that maybe I don't even understand why they pick the characters that they pick.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. They're kind of fucking with the other side too. It's like, huh? How do we explain that?
But that was really a hokey operation.
Oh, well, yeah. So by the way, we're going to talk about Tim McVeigh here. Did you hear about the 60 tons of ammonium nitrate that went missing?
No.
Oh, Russ. 60 tons of ammonium nitrate, which was being shipped from Dyno Nobel. And Dyno Nobel is one of the leading explosive manufacturers, right? Blast equipment and all this stuff. 60 tons was on a rail car, and theoretically, and when it was going from, I think, Wyoming or Montana or someplace like that, and somewhere in the Mojave Desert, it theoretically went missing. So when it got to its destination, 60 tons of ammonium nitrate is gone. So that's kind of floating around right now.
So they use that for explosives, or can they use it like poison?
No, that's the thing that theoretically Timothy McVeigh used in the bomb in Oklahoma City. And I say theoretical, right?
Right.
But so here's what's really weird about the whole situation is that the seal on the car, or where the 60 tons of this ammonium nitrate went missing, was not broken, according to Dyno Nobel. So how does 60 tons get out of her car with an unbroken seal?
It sounds like that episode of Breaking Bad where they stopped the thing and drained it into some kind of a tank.
Right. Well, I mean, so Dino Noble says, well, it could have leaked out along the way. A simple analysis of the tracks would let you know if that's true or not.
It could have, yeah.
Yeah. My theory is that it was never in there. Right. It was never in there. It didn't go.
It was just diverted, and that's kind of their way to cover the diversion
of
it.
That's right.
Okay.
That's what I think. So yeah, here we go. This is an interesting article here, or paragraph rather. He participated in a mysterious house of unspecified functions in Haight-Ashbury. This be Jolly West. At the height of the hippie scene, he was a consultant of some of the undetermined type, in the Charles Manson Helter Skelter murders. Those are the theorized that Manson and Dr. West met. So Manson was actually in San Francisco prior to going to LA. And it would not be uncommon for Manson to have run into somebody like Jolly West at his.
And Manson spent a lot of time in the prisons and was kind of a top candidate for whatever they were doing.
Right. Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. And here we go. Now we're getting into the SLA stuff.
Yep.
And we talked a little bit about that, this whole Project Phoenix thing that was going on at that time. And Project Phoenix was a kind of a mind control program that extended all the way out to Vietnam. And they were doing experiments in Vietnam. And then they were also doing stuff domestically. And so Donald DeFreeze comes out of the prison. He was an informer, right, which and he was connected to a guy through Project Phoenix. And so now we can make a connection here between Project Phoenix and Jolly West with this whole thing.
Yeah, I noticed again that Margaret Singer was on the scene with Patty Hearst. Another quinky dink.
Interesting. She used to shop at the Walgreens I worked at in Belmont, California. She'd come in with her husband, Bernard Shaw. They'd come in from time to time. Oh, Patty Hearst is here.
So Patty Hearst actually wrote her account of what happened after her arrest. Here's what she said. She says, when the first of the psychiatrists came to see me, just 11 days after my arrest, I simply crumbled under his scrutiny. I cried, murmuring and mumbling out replies that were not answers to his question. He thought I was refusing to cooperate with him. That was Dr. Louis Jolyon West, chairman of the Department of Psychiatry at UCLA. I thought he had a creepy, hypnotic voice, a tall, heavy-set man who appeared to be kindly. I suspected Jolly of being too smooth, too soothing to be trusted. With his hypnotic voice. Patty, listen to me, Patty. Patty.
Well, so that gets us into the neuro-linguistic programming territory. And these guys are very good at NLP. And once they get inside of you, they can kind of lead you around like a carrot.
Yeah.
They're very specific techniques with neuro-linguistic programming,
especially when you get some drugs involved in it too.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Then you get the drugs. It's like you're in the Disneyland of somebody's brain.
So then Jolly's next project, he just so happened to write an article offering a sanitized version of the Jonestown suicide. Kind of Jolly. Why don't you just help us kind of explain that one away?
Right. Another Project Phoenix operation. Yeah. Wow.
And then this is big. You got the False Memory Syndrome Foundation. So you have these kids that are coming out talking about being abused and young children. So they had to come up with a scam on that, and so they created this false memory syndrome.
Yeah.
That little kids just start imagining that they're being raped by adults. Really?
Right.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? That's what's going on?
Yeah.
And West was the director of the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, an organization founded by pedophile apologists that marginalizes victims of ritual abuse and smears their advocates. So he's mentioned in their newsletter.
Do you know how I know satanic ritual abuse is real?
Yeah.
I used to be friends with this guy in California, and he was a PhD. He was a psychiatrist, and we hung out a lot. And one day, so he would tell me about his clients sometimes. He wouldn't mention their names, right? He would tell me about his clients sometimes. And some of them were really way out there, right? And through some of these clients, he realized or understood that there was satanic ritual abuse involved. And so the reason I'm bringing this up in this context is that this guy was not into woo. He was not into conspiracy theories, right? He wasn't looking around for confirmation bias. He had these people showing up in his office, and he says, and I said, so is it real? He says, absolutely, 100%. He said, you'd be amazed how many people I have that come in, and these are the stories I get, and they're all connected. So when he said that, I'm like, wow, there's some traction here, because this was not a guy who would go anywhere near anything kind of rabbit holey with me, but there he was an unquestioned witness and kind of an expert in this field.
Yeah, if you want to get anybody wants to get a little bit more on that topic, I've got Read False Memory Narrative Used to Gaslight Child Victims. I've got an article on that you can go to. So now we go to the drum roll of Oklahoma City bombing. And oh Jesus, this is really a rabbit. So I don't think people have any idea how deep this rabbit hole goes, because this one's buried too. This one's really buried. What this Timothy McVeigh operation was all about.
Well, lay it on us.
Okay, let's just start with Dr. West. On the very day, so notice how they always bring the experts out on the day of these events to appear on.
Yeah, sure.
That's sort of a pattern.
Yeah.
West went on the Larry King show to talk about alleged bomber Timothy McVeigh, again characterizing the alleged perp as one more lone nut, i.e. not involved in a conspiracy. He was later personally involved with handling McVeigh in prison. I mean, how do you know, West? How do you know anything about this guy the day he was arrested?
Right.
Why do you have so much information on him? That's suspect to begin with.
Yeah.
So let's go through this article, Hidden in Plain Sight, The Truth of McVeigh and Bombing. Let's just kind of go through this. All right, there's a really interesting character, and I read his book. I actually got his book, and I don't think this guy's interviewed very much. I think I heard one interview, but he was in prison in Terre Haute, I believe it is, with this David Paul Hammer, who was a murderer.
Yeah.
And kind of in the adjoining cells, and they got to be friendly, and they were among the first group of inmates to be housed in the newly furbished death row wing of Terre Haute's maximum security prison, where they eventually were placed in adjacent cells. They spent 23 months as neighbors and spoke to each other on a daily basis. So Hammer wrote a book that you couldn't write a book like this. You couldn't come up with this material just out of your imagination. Very credible. But
have you read it? Have you read the book?
Yeah. It's one of the most unbelievable accounts I've ever heard of anything, because it just points to this whole thing we were just talking about.
Wow. Is this book still in print?
I believe so. Yeah, he wrote 2 books on the Oklahoma City bombing, and his autobiography, The Final Escape, Secrets Worth Dying For, and Deadly Secrets McVeigh and the Oklahoma City bombings. The second one is the one I heard. You might be able to find interviews online. There used to be some interviews with this guy.
Yeah.
So Hammer writes, with assistance from attorneys and their investigators, from journalists, I've tried to verify the information McVeigh provided. We have obtained thousands of documents and exhibits versus Freedom of Information Act request and litigation. My attorney or his investigators interviewed some of the individuals mentioned by McVeigh. So we'll get McVeigh's account as relayed to Hammer. McVeigh was no mastermind. Obviously he wasn't. He's just they called him the good soldier.
Right. Yeah.
So he's kind of perfect patsy.
Right.
McVeigh had some fine qualities. He was able to follow instructions to a T, but his intelligence was average at best. His communication skills were limited, and he definitely was not a leader. So I say, besides reading the book, I listened to the entire Horton Hammer interview below. I think I should have the link there, and checked it with other clues. In the interview below, Hammer provides the caveat that his information is based upon what McVeigh told him over time. So it just feels like a solid version of the truth with some inconsistencies because he's kind of relaying what McVeigh told him. It's not his account.
Right.
McVeigh stated that he was recruited while in the Army by quote unquote the major and was sheep dipped to infiltrate patriot militia groups. He never disclosed the mysterious major by name. His unit was attached to the Defense Department. According to the major, the unit was so secret that even the U.S. Secretary of Defense was unaware of its existence.
Wow.
So there's your deep states thing that you're always running into. The major explained that the agenda for the secret unit was primarily domestic intelligence gathering and internal threat evaluation with an emphasis on direct counteraction operations. Funding support for the operation would be provided through sources unconnected to the U.S. government. McVeigh was to familiarize himself with the rhetoric of extreme right ideology and create a plausible aura of disgruntled soldiers. So he was an agent,
right,
to be inserted into these kind of bogus groups that were also agents. It's like they create these groups, quote, patriotic militia, that are just full of agents of various sorts, including McVeigh.
Yep.
McVeigh's sidekick Nichols said that in December of '92, McVeigh told me that while he was serving the U.S. Army, he'd been recruited to carry out undercover missions. Hammer suggests McVeigh was a gung-ho authoritarian follower, had little political affinity towards the group he was infiltrating.
Right.
McVeigh was quote unquote discharged from the military in May '92, but on August 3rd, '93, somebody who looked and sounded just like him was filmed in uniform at Camp Grifton, North Dakota. Now, down below, I have this video. I've had to replace this video 3 times. So this is the 3rd version of this video that I've had to replace, and you can see it's no longer available.
So
that's really the frustrating part about writing my site.
If you ever find that video again, download it and then re-upload it to BitChute, so you'll be able to use it, and that way your information is intact. And people are gonna have to do this stuff now, So
right,
yeah.
So he was filmed at this he's filmed and I could say I saw the video. It's him. Some guy gets into a tank. He's looking around, and there's McVeigh's. He's supposed to be out of the military, but he's up there hanging out at this Camp Grafton.
Right.
His records state he was discharged early and before the Grafton cameo.
Yeah.
The FBI's Patriot Con plan was to infiltrate and discredit right-wing militias in the 1990s. 4-page telegraph written by FBI Louis Freeh. Louis Freeh is really a nasty individual.
They were way out in front of everything in the 90s. This was all the Clinton administration getting ready to put the hammer down on disgruntled people. Yeah.
Right, whether it's Waco or Oklahoma City.
Right.
Oklahoma City.
Richard Jewell in
this was a really cruel, vicious false flag. Back in the days when they weren't faking it, they would just kill people.
Yeah, I mean, look at the damage to that building, right? You know what's interesting about some of the people that died in Oklahoma City in that building? I believe, if I'm not mistaken, 2 of the federal officers who were security at Oklahoma City were former Clinton bodyguards. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah.
No, that stuff just goes on endlessly.
You know,
hard to find.
Those state troopers that Bill Clinton had contact with, right? So when you go back to Waco and you see that kind of invasion up on the second story and through the window at the Branch Davidian compound, those guys that are outside of that window, those are all former Arkansas State Troopers.
Really?
That's right.
He
And
sent his boys in to personally handle that operation. That's
well,
amazing.
they all died. Those guys died.
Oh,
Because
upon sacrifice.
This is the story, right? That the guy that went in first turned around and opened fire. And that was the opening salvo, right? Friendly fire. And one of the reasons why they needed to burn down the entire thing was the ballistics from that incursion, right? Because they would find that the bullets, came out this way and probably would have been able to size up the bullet holes with the exact caliber, and that caliber would match the gun, right? So you had those dudes up on the second story. I think one guy lived, and then you had two more, and these events are connected, right? Waco and Oklahoma City are connected,
right?
And two more of those guys, they didn't get the memo. They were at work that day, and so you had at least 5 former Arkansas State Troopers that Bill Clinton had found positions for inside the federal government. And by coincidence, they're dead, right? A coincidence? Question mark. Anyway, it's an interesting, weird factoid around this.
Yeah, it could even been guys that just kind of wanted to shut up anyway. Maybe they knew too much.
Well, of course they knew a ton about Clinton. They drove him around.
Yeah. Let's get rid of these guys. Let's get them on this little operation.
They probably saw him snorting coke all the time, and
right,
getting Hummers, and they were too dangerous.
So there's a FOIA request that contains several references to an FBI undercover operation, LAM City. LAM City is sort of the hotbed that's sort of tied to this bombing.
Let's say now Arizona, by the way, right?
Arkansas. LAM City is Arkansas, which is kind of interesting because you just mentioned Arkansas.
There we go. Arkansas. There we
go. With this teletype, and for the first time, there's clear evidence that an informant operation was conducted by attorney Morris D's organization, the Southern Poverty Law Center. The teletype repeatedly refers to Oklahoma's bombing subject, Timothy McVeigh, as well as bomb ROM subject. When the militia undertook the bank robberies, McVeigh proclaimed, "Everybody was impressed when I was able to secure the radio frequencies for the FBI and ATF. The major provided these to them," he said. This is him relaying this to Hammer. Right. Those are very, very interesting details.
Yeah.
That you just don't pull out of your ass sitting on death row.
Yep. Yeah, that's true.
Think about it.
Let me ask you a question.
That's what I kept thinking through this whole book and interview. Where is this guy coming up with this stuff?
Right. Let me ask you a question. There are some people who believe that Timothy McVeigh did not die.
I believe that.
Yeah.
I believe that because, in fact, I go into that a little bit.
Yeah.
It slipped him out.
Yeah. Wow.
Because he followed orders, he was really a dedicated agent. So, there's a certain code of ethics, I guess. He had a tough
either that or they're very into repurposing people. I mean, let's I tell you what, here's what we're gonna do. We'll go in, we'll send him to West. He'll go in and give him a new identity. We'll we'll send him out somewhere.
Yeah, else. Too valuable. Right, exactly, too valuable. Just changes looks a little bit. So they got, I don't know, I got the whole story of the CTV footage of McVeigh's truck in front of the Murrah building is missing, of course, par for the course.
Right. Sure.
Right. The public was told that 4 cameras in 4 locations were blank at basically the same time in the morning of April 19th. So you got this whole pattern of constantly the CTV, show me the CCTV, right. Constantly missing. The FBI claims the security camera did not record just prior to the blast or during the blast because they had, quote, run out of tape and tape was being replaced.
Always. Kind of like Epstein, right? Oh, geez, our cameras were just down.
All the tapes, aspect of all the tapes, they suddenly began recording again right after the blast, yet there's no footage of the truck pulling up to the building, parking, or of multiple passengers exiting the truck, as seen and attested to by a number of eyewitnesses, which can be viewed in the documentary Noble Lie, which I would recommend everybody sees that. Hammer's book discusses a huge trail back to others. The government never pursued them for the Oklahoma City bombers. Therefore, one could conclude that most of this violent, lethal militia story was a facade of COINTEL agents and criminal informants. They were taken down for bank robbers and other crimes. One of the John Does was found dead in a Kentucky jail. So they had a cleanup operation afterwards of everybody kind of connected to this Patriot group, just started dying.
Right.
Taken down for bank robberies, other crimes.
Terry Nichols is still alive. He's in that Supermax in Colorado.
Yeah, but he kind of just fell into it. It was just almost like guilt by association because he knew McVeigh.
Yeah, they had to have, I guess, a living patsy to keep around, right?
I don't think he really knew that much. So Hammer offers a theory they weren't just informants. Up above one paragraph, yeah. They were criminals committing criminal acts, sometimes apparently in their capacity as informants. So just let these informants just run wild criminal activity.
Interesting.
They robbed 22 banks in 7 states. And Hammer writes that whenever he suggested to McVeigh that he may have been set up as a patsy, McVeigh would get very angry at Hammer. McVeigh never thought of himself as a patsy.
Yeah, interesting.
McVeigh revealed that he handled $50,000 to begin his mission of hobnobbing with other agents and informants at gun shows, etc. When he penetrated the Elohim City group, the joke was that there was more COINTEL agents than real militia, so much so that it was known as Alphabet City. It's just a deep state creation.
Right.
So they were, in the lead up to the bombing, the law enforcement was receiving ample intel about what was being planned. So there's plenty of clues coming in, supposedly. And McVeigh commented to Hammer on the bomb assembling and drug dealing and bank robberies. The feds are like Keystone cops. They can't do shit unless they have some foreman doing their job for them. I was all across the country doing these jobs. Yeah. McVeigh thought that Andre Strassheimer was working for some other entity. Strassheimer was a very unusual character. He was the son of Gunther Strassmeyer, who's the chief of staff of the German Chancellor Helmut Kohl.
Interesting.
Really?
Yeah.
One of the main.
Yeah, I remember this Strassmeyer character.
And he just left. He joined the German army. After he left the German army, he was a member of an evangelical Christian group, lived in a kibbutz in Israel.
The kibbutz is like deep cover.
This is crazy.
You want to go
and then, of course, they just let him leave the country, and he's in Germany to this day. And I think he was the guy that put the bomb in the building down underneath in the basement.
Yeah. So this back in the day, I was living in California, Bay Area, and so there was this talk radio station, and it was I think KGO. I always get it confused with KSF. It was KGO, and KGO went into sort of the hard right territory, and they had Michael, what's his name on there? Forget his last name, but one of the guys who was a host in the morning was this guy, Jeff Metcalf. And Jeff Metcalf was talking about this stuff all the time. I found, wow, this is really interesting. They're letting this guy get on a radio station in San Francisco And so he covered the Oklahoma. He was on the air, and Michael Savage is the guy. You know Michael Savage?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
Michael Savage.
he's pretty well known.
He got a start on KGO radio in the Bay Area, so he was part of this whole lineup. And Jeff Metcalf talked about this, and Jeff knew. Jeff used to be in the military, and he broke the story about Brigadier General Parton, who was down in the basement, right? You know this story, right? This guy who went there saw all these plastic explosives that were still there in the basement,
right?
And they said it's the most asinine excuse for having them there. Well, we had them there for a drill. Pardon my language, Russ, but why the fuck would you have live explosives inside the basement of that building for a drill?
This is really when they started ramping up the black magic, was just these
absolutely
what I call cartoon world stuff that people are asked to believe, but people don't really know. People don't really hear this stuff. So Strassmeyer, let's see what to say about Strassmeyer. He talked about this crew. Their meth ads distributed so McVeigh purchased some meth, distributed to his network, used some personally. And there are a number of speed freaks. McVeigh said that they're just a criminal gang posing as a militia patriot group.
Interesting.
These guys were, for the most part, lifetime fuck ups, not trained or disciplined soldiers, not ready for any time or anywhere. They seem like a lot of talkers.
Right.
McVeigh's evaluation of the ARA members is different. These guys, even Langan, were very disciplined. You have to ask yourself, how did they get this way? He told Hammer. Subsequent research by Hammer and his people on the outside revealed that many of the fuck-ups that McVeigh tried to ensnare in the bomb plot thought that McVeigh was a government agent, which he was.
Yeah.
So at a March 17th meeting, this is leading up to the bombing, the major introduced McVeigh to a man he referred to as Poindexter. According to McVeigh, Poindexter was the major's choice for building the bombs plural. There would be more than one. Right. McVeigh told Hammer that he selected Brescia as the main person to assist him in delivering the truck bomb to the target. Reporter J.D. Cash verified McVeigh's claim that he met with Strassmeyer, and Cash was the first reporter to discover the existence of at least 5 dancers at the Lady Godiva strip club in Tulsa who identified all 3 men as being at the club that night. I love this stuff. This is really funny.
It's kind of like IDing the guys who supposedly flew the planes into the World Trade Center at the strip clubs as well. Right. Yeah.
Right. Snorting cocaine.
Right. These devout Muslims hanging out at the strip club.
According to McVeigh, the Ryder moving truck seen by eyewitnesses parked at the Gary State Park in Kansas near Junction City for a few days was a decoy. The truck was purposely placed there in plain sight. McVeigh said the Brescia drove the newly painted decoy from Tulsa to Junction City.
Interesting.
They ran an interview with an eyewitness named Connie Smith, who kept saying, I kept telling them that the man in the John Doe sketch was that Mike guy, a nice looking guy, dark skin, but the FBI made me feel guilty, then ignorant, as if though I didn't know what I was saying. Kind of reminds me of the lady that saw the Sirhan Sirhan and the polka dot girl at the, you ever hear that?
Yeah.
You ever hear that interrogation?
Yeah.
Oh, you're crazy. You're crazy. You don't know. This is not what happened. You shouldn't be saying this thing. It's going to make the Kennedys feel very bad. That she saw Sirhan, the polka dot lady, leaving the hotel.
So, Russ, this is an epic article here, and I'm going to put a link to it in our show notes here. And unfortunately,
there's the John Hammer interview right there. So
okay,
listen to it yourself.
Okay, so I'm going to make sure that there's a link to this so people can go down this rabbit hole and find out more about this really bizarre backstory with Tim McVeigh and Strassmeyer, and so we'll put that, we'll pin that for now. And in the meantime, we're going to return to your buddy, Dr. Jolly West, and kind of round this thing off here, and we'll put a bow on it. So he's got all this involvement with all these characters, including Timothy McVeigh, and Stubb. So I think this is, if I'm not mistaken, I think this is Albert Stubblebine, who is what's her name? Leibau, Rena Leibau, who is this woman who like went down the whole Codex Alimentarius. I think that's her husband. There's not too many Stubblebines, but this is who he's talking about here. J.M. Stubblebine. Could be, I don't know. Maybe it's not, but I would say that they're probably related. Stubblebine is not a common name. Anyway. So what does he say? He says, I'm in possession of confidential information. The Army is prepared to turn over to the Nike missile bases to the state and local governments for non-military purposes. Well, that sounds like a great idea. They may look with special favor on health-related applications. So what is he saying there, Russ? Are they abandoning the bases? Is that what he's saying?
Well, they're taking advantage of this Nike base to kind of hide away and do weird shit.
Right.
Weird
So are they decommissioning the Nike missile, or are they running it kind of in parallel program with that?
I think they didn't need the facility for some reason. Maybe it was just redundant or something like that. I don't know the real reason why the Nike thing became available. But the bottom line is they were going to make this available as a research facility to hide things away. Such programs might include drug or alcohol abuse, modification of chronic antisocial and impulsive aggressions. The site could also accommodate conferences or retreats for instruction of selected groups of mental health related professionals and others, law enforcement. So just kind of like a little hideout to do their shit.
Right.
You can only imagine. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what they did there.
So I have a friend who I've done a lot of shows with, and part of her background is that she believes, and I don't disbelieve her, by the way, she believes that she was part of a program in Chatsworth, which is in LA. It's like close to LA. And this is kind of that same area, right? That they actually had facilities in Chatsworth where they were working on people, and she believes that she was one of them. And I don't have no inclination to disbelieve her at all. So it's a hotbed of this activity. Let's get to this last paragraph because I think it's really interesting. It may help us kind of tie this whole thing up. Among the programs that Dr. West foresaw taking place at the Violence Center were genetic, neurophysiological, and biochemical studies of violent persons, studies on so-called hyperkinetic or hyperactive children, hormonal aspects of passivity and aggressiveness in boys, and surveys of norms of violence among various ethnic groups. So he's working on theories like ADD, ADHD, and what do? They prescribe drugs for these boys who are just normally rambunctious.
And they're sort of selecting these people.
Right.
The selection process is really important.
But the widespread application of it is social, right? So they'll select people, guinea pig them, get the results they want, and then start to make these connections with political influencers, media influencers, and drug companies. And all of a sudden, we got a problem. And it's boys.
And then it's socializing people to go and loot stores and attack white people, and a lot of the things that nobody wants to talk about today.
Well, that's all socially engineered. I mean, it's
got to be something going on, and maybe even more. Who knows what they're doing to some of these kids?
Yeah. No, I mean, at some point, like the machine just takes over, and you don't really have to do much. The machine will do it for you, right? Like it's really interesting. I was telling you earlier about this interview with Tim Floyd and Jason Whitlock, and Tim Floyd was talking about the portal, they have this thing now in the NC2A. So if you want to transfer your school from a school, you enter what's called the portal. They have these portal periods, which allow kids to basically say, I don't want to play at this college anymore. I want to decommit and commit to another college. And this whole portal thing has completely altered the landscape of how athletes, student athletes in college experience college. But not only that, but it is socially engineering these coaches to not to think twice about what they're going to say to a kid, right?
Right.
Or
completely change their ability to coach.
Absolutely, or bench them because they were, a fuck up. Now they're afraid they're going to step into the portal and leave. And so this is when kind of the machine just starts to take over and it has a life of its own. Right now, the social engineering is, supposedly about the freedom of choice and the student athlete.
But what is it with West and this constant referring to implanting of tiny electrodes in the brain? What constantly?
Yeah.
I mean, where does that all go? Is that supposed to just be nothing? That's just like another coinky dink. It doesn't mean anything.
Well, if you want to go down the rabbit hole, the big rabbit hole, right? The big rabbit hole is chemtrails and geoengineering and the chafe and what's in the chafe. And what's in the chafe are, guess what? Nanomachines, right? That's in the chafe. What do nanomachines do? Well, they assemble inside the body. Can nanomachines penetrate the brain-blood barrier? Absolutely. And how many people are running around right now with little machines in their brains? I mean,
and how many sleeper cells have been brought in over the border from God knows where?
Listen. I'm living close to the border here, and I am not feeling all warm and fuzzy about what's just happened over the last couple of weeks. People here in Texas are kind of on edge. And speaking of false flag, there's a big rumor of a false flag, and the target, based on some, various evidence, whether it's true or not, or planet or whatever, is Houston. And that would make a lot of sense. Now, you also add in 60 tons of ammonium nitrate missing, right? Whether it's missing or not, it's kind of out there in the consciousness.
And take Timothy McVeigh and multiply it by thousands right. Of these guys.
Right. And
the technology since Timothy McVeigh's days has really been ramped up.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Absolutely. Just quick little note about the prison he was in Terre Haute, Indiana. There was a guy who was at that same prison, and he had gone to college with Dan Quayle, and he had sold Dan Quayle drugs when Dan Quayle was in college in Indiana. And that guy was put in solitary confinement for the entirety of the Bush campaign. They didn't want anybody talking to this dude. And of course, Dan Quayle was a payback. He was a political payback for the Bush family. Same place in Terre Haute, Indiana.
Well, the execution of McVeigh, Hammer says that he doesn't have he doesn't know for sure what's happened.
Right.
What did he say? He said, what did he say? Let's take a look at that again real quick, because he said some things about the execution at the end of that. It's kind of worth mentioning this.
This is epic. Russ, I would hope that somebody could turn all your work into a cohesive
people
book.
People don't even read this stuff. Readership of this stuff pretty low. Okay, was he actually executed?
Yeah, that's what we talked about.
All right, McVeigh told Hammer and Paul that he believed his execution would be fake. So that's what McVeigh believed. Right. They're going to rescue me.
Right.
I'm going through all this because they're going to rescue you. He even went so far as to say that his handlers had a drug that closely simulated death and that he would be revived.
Right.
Hemmer had no idea if the major threw McVeigh under the bus when the time came. If so, McVeigh wouldn't be the first patsy to face such a fate, nor the last. McVeigh was handled during incarceration by the notorious West, we referred to. Okay, the lone West was at the was in it. I'm kind of repeating what we already talked about. So, okay, the execution did have some dicey aspects. Several eyewitnesses said they saw no signs of actual death, that he was covered from chin to toe with a sheet. He didn't want an autopsy, and his ashes were reportedly turned over to his lawyers after a quick cremation. In fact, this is from Susan Carlson of WSLSM Radio, who's there, eyewitness. She says, in fact, it was hard to even tell when he had passed on because of his shallow breathing. And what appeared to be shallow breathing continued even after they pronounced him dead. And his eyes remained open the entire time. I don't think he even blinked. So that's an eyewitness to the execution.
Yeah, there's also
here's a hokey looking McVeigh morgue photo with enormous neck tendons. Who looks like that? That's a fake photo.
I also heard that there was probably more than one McVeigh, right? That they had somebody who looked like him or could have been a brother or a twin. But a lot of this stuff happens in twins, and I wouldn't be surprised if they had, kind of a fake McVeigh or a reasonable facsimile McVeigh. He's kind of a generic looking guy in some ways.
Yeah, here's a picture taken of somebody that looks like McVeigh at at a Occupy Wall Street protest.
So
was taken.
yeah, yeah, it's bizarre territory, and I think there was eyewitness accounts that McVeigh was laughing before the execution. Right, he was like just kind of like it looked like he was actually laughing and chuckling with somebody in the room or something like that. There's more than one eyewitness account that says the whole thing was very suspicious in terms of its actual
He told Hammer he wouldn't be executed.
Right. Well, Russ, it's been another dirty deep dive down the memory hole, and it's a good one. And when you look at these stories and you look at the people involved and you see where they were 60 years ago, 50 years ago, to your point, technology has really accelerated, and the applications of these techniques are they're insidious now, and they've figured out how to basically manicure an entire nation of potential Manchurian candidates.
I think that's it. And they keep him a little bit more under the radar than they did in Jolyon West days. He was a little too much of a rock star.
Right.
A little too obvious.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There were a lot of guys back then that wanted to take credit for their groundbreaking work. Now it's really under the radar. So
yeah,
Russ,
find guys with a little less of an ego.
Right. Hold on.
But I'm sure they all have fancy mansions and sports cars somewhere.
Probably, or they're getting or they got their e-ticket to the continuity of government underground condominium complex, and that's their carrot, right?
If I did it, I'd take a share in the grifting business of looting stores and putting it online selling. I want a cut of that. That's what I want.
Do my dirty work. Look, listen, I know it would be dangerous, but you could be first on the ground in Prague for something like that, I bet. all you have to do is find some Albanians and they'll do the dirty work for you. But
I have a hard time lying and with a straight face. I'm just kind of like the worst liar that ever lived. And Russ, I go with Abraham Lincoln said that no man has a good enough memory to be a successful liar. So I don't think I could do it. But there are people that are really cut out for this stuff.
Oh yeah.
And they just lie. They just lie right to your face and just laugh at you.
Yeah.
No, to me.
No, these are the real sociopaths. and they'll just tell you whatever you want to hear or whatever they want you to hear. Right. So anyway, another good, healthy dive into the past. And we'll see you in a month. And if what people aren't aware of is we're actually doing this as a recorded interview. I think it's the first one we've ever done, Russ.
Yeah, it's not bad because it's light here. It's kind of nice.
Yeah. So maybe we'll want to do a couple more of these pre-records and put them up on a Friday, and maybe free up some of your Fridays, and you can hang out and socialize in Prague during the spring and the summer. How's that sound?
I'm moving. I'm clearing out of this neighborhood. I'm going to a little more of a different area of Prague, away from the tourists in the center.
Oh, cool. Good for you. Got to get to see another part of the city and hang
You
out.
got Prague you have this called Prague 1, which is Old Town, is like 300, 400-year-old buildings. So the building I'm in right now, you're seeing, is reconstructed. It's from 1690.
Wow.
That's how old this building is.
That's some history. That's cool, man.
So I'm going to a new building. It's kind of an Italianate style that they built in another neighborhood called Vino Harde, up kind of on the hill behind the museum. For anybody that's been to Prague probably knows that. And it's Italianate. It's built in a 20-year period back in the Habsburg days before World War I. They just built this massive neighborhood out with these 100-year-old buildings.
Right. Yeah, new kids on the block. So you can find Russ's work at winterwatch.net. And if you like the articles that we've gone over, there are plenty more there. So, Russ, until next month, you take care of yourself. All right.
You too. See you, everybody.